Hi, I'm finally getting to do this video after a while, and this is a guide to every deck in MSEM, which there's a lot of decks, so I'm just going to be covering some of the more meta ones and some of my personal favorites. So let's start off with the deck that won the last GP in Heart Attack. Specifically the Sultai version of Heart Attack made by Test, and as you can see here, Splash Cat. And this deck, as its name suggests, wants to leverage the card Heart of Zadina to make a ton of mana and consistently tutor it out with Intrepid, which got nerfed from a 3/3 to a 4/4 after this deck won, and Gate of Realms. Other than that, it plays kind of a rampy control plan with Portal Fractures, Sinkhole as counterspells, along with Reconsider, Prying Inquiry as hand tape but also card draw, Simul as just a value planeswalker that also can untap Heart, Delve for Treasures as a big X spell, Mastery of the Veil as a big X spell that kills your opponent, Biohazard as a board clear, which is super cool, and RFE just as an amazing card draw and red piece. And the way of this deck, because of Gate of Realms, Gate of Realms and Heart, you run a pseudo Highlander mana base where you have a bunch of fetches that have duplicate names, but most of the stuff you're fetching has different names except for the obviously 2 copies of Swamp and 2 copies of Island. And I think I'm just going to close these windows as we go through, but I guess I should go over the sideboard first. The meta this was played in was the Herald of Oblivion month meta, which means Trauma Spike was very good here, and now that Herald has been nerfed, probably Trauma Spike is a lot worse now. Stand Unassailable is just a pretty ubiquitous sideboard card against aggro. Sin Grasp is an absolutely insane sweeper. Celestial Banishment is just an okay hate card, and Seal the Tomb is also good against Herald, but also other combo decks, especially graveyard ones. Next up, we have a Mabel deck by Test, which won the GP before GPG, and Test won 2 GPs in a row, both with Blue-Green X control decks. So let's talk about this one. As its name suggests, this is built around the Mabel card, which has First Mate, which is MSEM's companion mechanic, where rather than being able to pay 3 to effectively have that extra card for a low cost, you actually have more of a cost in MSEM, and you only get to swap it with a card in your hand, which makes it a lot worse compared to Companion, and actually very well balanced in my opinion. So Mabel is just a 3-mana 2/2 flash. When it enters, you gain 2 life and draw a card, which might not seem good, but you have access to the card draw in life gain every game, and it's especially relevant in aggro mid-range matchups if you need threat. So this deck is more of a tempo deck, so you have cards like Veilborn Meddler, Cane Dancer, Matya, and Panya to get those early threats down, and since they all flash, you can always leave up your counterspells, like Cosmic Sinkhole, Vortex Vitae, does Banned Command counterspell? No, it doesn't. End of All Things, actually exiles an element permanent, Lost Their Dreams, Out of Body Experience is also removal, and the mana base is a pretty standard Blue-Green X one. In your sideboard, you have Powder Scatterers for a nice threat that also hits non-creature spells, Still the Pandemonium, another nice non-creature spell hate card. Seabreen Nullmage can counter shock fetch activations and other cards too. Reminisce is just some nice graveyard recursion. I'm not really sure what scenario. I guess this is if you don't really want to mill out. And then Invalidate is just a Force Spike. That's also sometimes a Mana Tithe. Next up, we have 2 decks. And these decks, I didn't really want to decide between them, since neither of them are actually similar to the quote-unquote classic villainy decks. So I think I'm just going to look at them both. And also, Dreadrise is going through a bug right now where double-faced cards have their backside instead of their front side for some reason. Don't ask me why. So we're going to have to go over to Instigator and look at Bow's Descent. I'll just leave that here for you to read. And then the backside is this. So here, this is Cyber's deck from this GP, and we can see it has obviously the card the deck is built around. Villainy, probably one of the best engines in MSEM by far. Absolutely insane card. You run cards like Pay Up, Prying Inquiry for discard, Valdez also. Find Happiness and Misery is some great draw, along with Whisperwood's Exploration. Dead Man's Party can get a ton of stuff black since almost all your cards are black. Exeunt, also some nice removal. Salome's Intervention is actually an interesting include in here, It can drain your opponent and comes back whenever you cast your second spell, so pretty often. Prying Inquiry, more discard. Pithwelt, some more removal. And Salome, another really interesting choice, which this card was absolutely insane, got nerfed immediately. But this is playing the nerfed version, which instead of being able to trigger on both players' turns, it triggers on only one player's turn. But this card still sees play as being, like, at least in this deck, as being just a board wipe that also draws cards, untaps lands, lets you deal a spell, does some cool stuff. The sideboard, you have the Afterlife Takes Its Due, and Single Grasp as sweepers, more Salome's Intervention, Forbidden Treasure for Phoenix, and Seal the Tomb 2 also for Phoenix, along with one more in Apraxia's Endeavor. Cyber was really terrified of Phoenix, and although there's only 2 copies in the GP, those being me and Pipsqueak, yeah, you should be prepared for Phoenix. Okay, here's the other Villainy deck, and this one is by Neon Blue, and it's Villainy, but it's more discard Villainy, running a new card from TMI, Curse of Impending Doom, similar to Shrieking Affliction from Canon Magic. So you run more cards like some weird cards like Psychic Assault. I have actually never seen this card before. Prying Inquiry and Expose. These are some more staple discard cards along with Valdez and Conspiracy of Ravens. Find Happiness and Misery. Again, some draw works with Villainy really well. Bell's Descent. We saw, again, bugged out with Dread Rise. Callum Weller, another interesting include. I haven't really seen this card too much, but it actually seems like a pretty good value Planeswalker. And here we have some spicy include in the sideboard with Noxious Upwelling, which gives all creatures -2/-2 until end of turn for 3 mana, which is pretty on rate. But you can stack a swamp to copy it, which is really interesting. Go Blank, which is a reprint from Strixhaven, just a nice Grave Hate card. And Apraxia's Endeavors and Duress. Duress for non-creatures and Apraxia's Endeavor for graveyards. This deck is really prepared against Phoenix, I'll say that. Next up, we have another mono black list. So I want to include just like a classic mid-range list rather than the more control-y versions that are Villainy. So I'm going to just be showing a lot of mono black lists in a row, kind of. So here, this is Nyx's mono black list from a GPE 3 months ago. I'm not sure how well it performs, but it's a pretty cool deck. You've got Swarming Midden in the mana base as a nice creature land. You got Pay Up, Scrap Metal as discard pieces. Whoops. Sorry. I got pinged on Discord. Probably cutting this out. So you got Pay Up Scrap Metal as discard pieces along with a most important prince. You've got your value creatures like Auric Soulweaver, which can do a ton of stuff. Draw cards, gain life, exile cards, remove creatures, because almost all your spells have black types. Veindrinker's Kabbalist, Pseudo Ragavan, that's still really good. Why would you ever print Ragavan? That card is insanely busted. We've got Premissary, which interestingly has no poly pools to find. For those, let me just search that up here for those who don't know. Poly pools is a land with Changeling, a land with Changeling. So you can search it up with Profane Emissary to both get your land and give Profane Emissary +2/+2 in lifelink. But you are running other tutors like Kaijo, Smirk, interestingly, Jejun has just a really big threat, and Yumo Wang. You also run Cecilius as a nice planeswalker, a most important print, not a most important, long forgotten for card draw and Grave Hate, Bloodjade Prophet for even more card draw, so lots of card draw and stuff in this deck. Weku's Influence is an interesting sideboard include, just discarding cards, and Apraxia's removal, Grave Hate, all that jazz. Wave of Decay, also another really good card, life gain, absolutely insane against aggro. Seal the Tomb for combo decks, and Just Business for some more legendary hate if Kaijo wasn't enough. And this is another deck with a bugged thing. So this is non-creature spells. This is kind of like a better Thalia that can also flip into just something that hits all spells. And kind of like a Grand Arbiter Augustine. And this is actually not an updated deck list because it runs the nerfed Confining Priest. For those who don't know, this used to be able to exile creatures you control. So let me explain this deck because it's pretty complicated and I'm going to probably have to take more time with this deck than the other decks. So let me explain it. So this deck, as its name suggests, Pod Watcher, uses the combination of God Watcher and Pod effects to both tutor out God Watcher and get your combo. So what does God Watcher do? It lets you search your deck. You're almost never searching your opponent's deck unless you're in a mirror, in which case that is absolutely insane. For a creature card, exile it, and then when it dies, you put that exiled card. So what you can do with this is, if you have a sack outlet and God Watcher out, you can just God Watcher, tutor for a sack outlet, sack God Watcher to your Pod effect, get the sack outlet, which in this case is Channeler of the Veil, which makes your opponent lose a life. So you can God Watcher, use something like Selective Breeding, right? Sack God Watcher, get Channeler of the Veil out, get Dark Behemoth, sack Dark Behemoth to your sack outlet, right? And then Dark Behemoth will get back God Watcher, sack God Watcher again, get another Dark Behemoth, and then you loop the 2 Dark Behemoths. And yeah, that's how you win with this deck. You've got Miss Margaret Barton for some hate. And you also do have a solid aggro plan. You have Hierarch Ranger, Mana Ascetic for Mana Dorks, Lumi Orthodox as Knight's Hate. Ascended Explorer used to combo with Confining Priest, but does not anymore, sadly. Kylan for removal, Commanding Princess for just overall being an insane card, and Bloodjade Prophet as card draw. The sideboard, you've got a bunch of one-ofs, but Adam is a big one. This is technically a first mate, I believe, for this deck, since you run a ton of humans, but you're rarely picking this up. You've got Henry, River City's Mayor, as just some more non-creature spell hate. Unassuming Swineherd, I don't know what this card does. I forgot, I just remember it's a big grave hate piece. Sign of Silence, make stuff. Paragon of Honor shuts down stuff that enters and isn't cast. Cognitive Fumigator is discard, and Anointed Cursebreaker is artifact and enchantment removal. So this deck is pretty complicated, but can do some crazy things. And it did win a GP, that being GPE. Being pretty much a rogue deck after it got a card banned. Yes, this deck got a card banned, and then it still won a GP after that card got banned. Okay, now we're getting to more, the first deck that is one of my decks, and I'm actually running actually, I think this is a sideboard that's reasonable. So, this is my deck that I brewed, only 6 days ago. That's kind of crazy to me. But this is a mono-red Storm deck that does some fun things. So, how does this deck work? You're probably seeing a lot of cards that you might not have ever seen before, especially if you haven't been, haven't played against this deck or other similar decks. So, how does this deck work? Your goal is to stick a cost reducer on turn 2, like Flatbow Artisan, Selma, or Herald of Ankulim, which you have 10 copies of overall. So what you do from there is you storm off using cards like Mana Overflow. Left on the Wayside is your only ritual, so theoretically you can win turn 2. Sizzle Mage's Kindling Adventure is also technically a ritual with a cost reducer out, but not with that one. Culminating Chaos and, Culminating Chaos and Flamecaller's Command serve the same role in the deck, but Culminating Chaos is a lot better with that Escalate ability. Flamecaller's Command does sweep the board sometimes, but you're usually just exiling and adding mana. You've got Goddess's Whimsy as actually a pretty nice one because you run Galvan Coal Lines, so you can, if you hit land or coal line or whatever with it, you can play the coal line and then get another spin with it. And obviously you really can just, at worst, you're playing this as an impulse that hits 2 non-lands, right? That's still insane in the Storm deck. You have Unleash the Dragon, which is a Grave Shop that hits 1 target. And then your backup plan is Unceasing Flames, in case that gets Sealed, Attuned, or Trauma Spiked, or whatever. Sideboard, you've got 4 Soliloquies to be pesky control decks. Sealed Riftway and Shikai's Readout for graveyards. Fire Bloom for tempo, since that is a really bad matchup for the deck. And Metal Munch for both artifacts and... And now, please... this is actually the bad version of Phoenix, and this was a deck that, as you can see, I'm the one who brewed the current version of it. This is the version I am playing in this GP, and this deck kind of came out of nowhere on the last day of GP submission. Got decklist twice, 150 from Nyx and 141 from me, And yeah, this deck is absolutely insane. And this isn't even the best deck. Like, there are, I believe, 2 improvements that I did not manage to make in time for GP submissions to this deck. One being data recovery, and the other being Whisperwood's Phoenix, which, let me just show those cards. Data recovery. This card lets you Phoenix turn 2, because you get to do some, because it gets to copy something from your graveyard. And this is just another Phoenix, albeit worse. Although this second Phoenix actually added after the GP started in League, so not really, but let me talk about the deck. So the deck is based off of the Phoenix, Myoga Firebird, which is kind of like an Arclight Phoenix. And so your goal is to kind of just turbo dump your graveyard and then cast 3 instant sorceries and deal a ton of damage. So to do this, you run a Spirit Script package with Against the Waves and Unceasing Flames, both the 2 Storytime Conjurers that are 1 mana, Against the Waves being probably one of my favorite cards, and also an absolutely insane card in this deck, milling tons and tons of cards. You also run a bunch of discard like Unquenched Greed, Weave from Chaff, Creative Salvage, and Gift of the Phoenix to just dump all your cards in hand to the graveyard, because you have cards you want to discard, like Spirit Script and Myoga Firebird, right? You also run Plaxolotl PRE and Mina, cards that care about your stuff being mana value 1, and since pretty much everything you run is mana value 1, that's good. Oracle's Vision is another self-mill card, and Relive Reality can flash back your cards, really valuable with Unceasing Flames. Another absolutely insane thing you can do with this deck is Plaxolotl PRE with Unceasing Flames to deal upwards of 10 damage for 1 mana, which, yeah, is absolutely insane. And this deck actually only runs 15 lands, interestingly, because of how much card draw it has. Which, yeah, that might seem weird, but you have so much card draw that it doesn't matter as much. Sideboard, I messed this up, but you have 2 Readouts, 4 Fire Erasures, 2 Sealed Riftways, 3 Soul Pierce, and 4 Spell Pierce. This is like a fine sideboard in the meta, probably not the best, and I would maybe cut the Soul Pierces. Next deck, we've got This is another deck from Grand Prix Hyderabad, this time by Ginoid Poet. Ginoid Poet? I don't know. Ginoid Poet or Marina, who is just absolutely going to kill you as fast as possible. You've got Rainy Night Lovers to hit some mana value 1 instant sorceries, along with being a 3 mana 3/2 haste. Embercore Grazer to just absolutely bunch in and do a ton of damage. Neon Claw Knight being one of the best cards in the deck, especially with Hatsuo's Maneuver. You have Rogger's Gambit as 1 mana 2 damage. You got Unceasing Flames. Scorch is a classic. Find Greater Purpose is another interesting one. It's a 1 mana impulse, but you have to sack a permanent, which is honestly fine in this deck. You have Unjust Sentence, which is kind of like a Lava Spike. Bossa Charm, which is a lot more like a Lava Spike. And then Mana Base, just a bunch of basics. Fireheart Falls. Sideboard, pretty standard stuff. You've got Readout, Brutal Blow, Forked Pillar, Paint with Starflame, and Exhilarating Prescience for those slower matchups where you need to just draw a ton of cards. Next up is a deck I am absolutely terrified of in Grand Prix Hyderabad, and that is Green-White Scam. Now, this deck came out and, like, people weren't really playing Scam. People were playing a ton of Green Elemental Circle. And this card is absolutely insane card. Has 36 copies in this GP, which is the most of any MSEM GP since I started playing the format, which isn't actually that long ago, but you get my point. You also have Duchess Odelia the 7th to go find it. And then in your deck, what your goal is to scam out Vile Progenitor, wrong card, Captured Pale Tusk, or Amorphous Tyrant early to get a big early board presence, and in the late game you have stuff like Cantrell Old Magic, Cosmonaut Pioneer, Scion of Flourishing to just get in for so much damage. Your blink spells you've got On Repeats, Across the Planar Void, Glory to the Star. And pretty standard mana base, Nebulas, Shock Fetches, Plagues, and Basics. Sideboard, you've got 4 Vivians. Vivian's kind of just a really nice mid-range piece, especially with Gek. You've got Aurora Hydra for control. Ultan Surveyor, still an insane sideboard card even after the nerf. Event Horizon, exiling non-land permanents. 2 more Justice Odelias, and Caustic Caterpillar. And this might seem really weird, but it's 2 double off Adelia, And I believe it was the only thing that Toasty and, as you can see here, Truk could find to fit in this slot. So I guess it works. I don't know. I wanted to showcase a sack deck because of the whole Lifelink Egg Herald nonsense that was happening last month. So I thought I'd showcase Pitchpire, which is a deck by Ducky or Trappables, which is built around Pitchpire Curse, and Herald of Oblivion, now being 2 mana, should probably be cut from the deck. But Pitchpire Curse basically gives you all 3 modes of Torment, of Hailfire, and whenever you attack, you can sack a creature to do that. So this is a sack-based aggro deck. You have Here With You as an insane card, can be 2 mana, draw 4, 2 mana, make 4 1/1s, both of which are really good. Minister of Zealots makes a 1/1 every turn, and will sack them often, but pretty much always, unless you play Scorch. But you don't care about that since you're sacking them anyway. Lantern Bearer Bell is just a 1 mana 3/1 with flying. Venom Pack discards a bunch of cards and is just a nice card. Got Shikai Revenant and Salomon's Messenger as cards that come back to your hand. Sidraxis Trampaniter as a really good sack outlet that discards your opponent. And Egg of Avarice is a absolutely insane card. Lets you sack a creature to tutor out anything with mana value 1 and put it onto the battlefield. And how this was being used before is you would tutor Herald of Oblivion out when it was 1 mana, and you could do some crazy things by giving it haste, lifelink, and hitting your opponent for so much damage. Volatile Stoneworks, also removal. Mana base, again, pretty standards, mountains, industrial district, and some plagues. Line Officer is an interesting choice, but it's 3 mana, deals 3 damage to all your opponent's creatures. Pretty good. Process Termination, also another really cool sideboard card that I haven't really seen much, which is hits creatures, enchantments, and planeswalkers and loses life equal to mana value. And Apraxia's Endeavor, Graveyards Removal, Nakal Skirmisher, Artifacts, Fetchable off Egg, Blazing Volley. It's Blazing Volley. It hits creatures with Whack being popular in the meta too, was a big thing. Beat and Batter. Used to stop life gain, but still pretty good with dealing 2 damage and stopping damage prevention. So let's go to our next deck, which is a tempo deck in Script. I don't know if it's called Script Kitty or Gutter Script. I'm just going to call it by Scripts because the deck is built around the script that we saw earlier, Spirit Script. And this card is really good because all your cards that care about additional copies in your graveyard are really good with it. So you have Sea Cache, which draws cards, then draws extra for all your other Sea Caches and Scripts. Diffuse, another card really good with Scripts. Sleepless Studies, just a 2 mana draw 2, makes a fatigue. Like, you can shuffle it away pretty easy. Portal Fracture, just a counterspell. Crest, just some removal. Panya, just a nice threat. Unlicensed Replication, another card really good with your cards that care about having more in your graveyard because you just shuffle more into your deck. You have Cloud Peak Spires, which is a land that gives lets all your islands tap for red. And you're actually running a ton of basics in this deck, and interestingly, only shock fetches. This is a little blank stack. I don't really know what's going on. You also have Daughter of Suisse. Is it Suisse? I don't know. But this is a gutter snipe, as the name suggests. If you have scripts in the graveyard sometimes, because it just deals 2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage, because your script is copying. Obviously, script can only become one thing each turn, but you can copy different cards with multiple scripts. Qilong Gust is a nice sideboard card. Forbidden Treasure, good against Phoenix and similar decks like it, though this deck was from a month ago. Just a good card for combos decks. Crest, again, some good removal. Spell Pierce, we know Spell Pierce. Petal Blade, interesting. I don't know, I haven't really seen this card, but it actually seems pretty good. Okay, let's get into this deck. And you're seeing some mystery. I want to cover this deck because I really like this deck, but sadly it got nerfed. So, this card used to be 1 mana, and it was absolutely busted. And now it makes 2 1/1s instead of just 1, and Epsilon is still the same. Okay, yeah, here we can see it. Yeah, there. So, this card was absolutely insane before, but let's still look at the deck. And as this deck's name suggests, it's built around Zerat, which is one of the best planeswalkers you can be playing, especially in this kind of tempo deck. You're also running Garth of the Chimera as just another nice threat. Isochron Wand also got hit with a nerf, but it's still pretty good at 3 to be able to just cantrip every turn, deal extra, deal some damage every turn, removes crease stuff. So you have Imperial Siege, destroys target non-basic land for 2 mana, which is good. Event Horizon, some efficient removal. Reconsider, an efficient counterspell. Crude Salvage, efficient draw. Monkey Shines, efficient draw. Fire Erasure, Sear Flesh, efficient removal. I think we're seeing a pattern here. Fiery Burst, really good removal, can cost 1 sometimes. Embodied Soul, a really efficient tempo threat. We're seeing that. This is just a tempo deck that's running Zirat, Garth, to draw some cards and do some cool things. This deck was made by Amethyst, and was played by 2 people, and Amethyst got second in their first GP with it, so I guess congrats to Amethyst, good job to them. Now, it's my turn, because I'm talking about some of my favorite decks now, and this deck doesn't work anymore. I don't know why I have it here. It just doesn't work anymore. I think we'll skip past it. If you're interested in the deck, it doesn't really work much more because Herald is 2 mana now. But if you've been playing MSEM, you should recognize most of these cards. And you can just understand why it doesn't work by looking at Butterfly Rebellion and then looking at Herald of Oblivion. So let's go to my next deck, which is, this is a fun deck. A really fun deck that I sadly wasn't able to play too much because you just have to, it's like you're screwed over by interaction, you're screwed over by counterspells. It takes a lot to play this deck. So let me explain this deck. This is a combo deck that uses Tether of Simplicity as its main combo piece, but also Reflect on Serenity. So how this deck works is Serene player combos with both Reflect on Serenity and Tether of Simplicity. You also have Deathless Siege, which also, this mana base is crazy. You'll understand why. And Deathless Siege is a card that keeps us alive for a bit, and then also combos with Tether, which I actually didn't realize in my first game with this deck, which is actually crazy to me. So, and you also have Director's Perks as kind of like a Sterling Grove, if you know that card in canon, which is really just a nice card that gains you life, and main thing is protecting your other enchantments. And for those who don't know, Oil of the Mind is in the deck because it works with Deathless Siege, and is a win con so you don't mill out. So how you find all these pieces is you run 16 commune cards. So what's a commune card? Look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Enchantment or land goes into your hand. Glimpse of the Sun only hits enchantment. A Journey Begins hits everything with mana value 3 or less. That's a permanent. So this is just worse than commune with Cantra. And Roads Untraveled is the same as commune. The mana base is absolutely insane. You run 3 Bastions, which is a great mana fixer. 4 Bustling Marketplaces, which will often just make all your colors. Nebula of Empty Gold, which costs 4 life, but makes all your colors. Then you're running Bolt Lands, which cost 3 life to enter untapped, but make 3 mana colors of mana. Sturdy Outpost makes white, blue, green. Tree of Timelines makes blue, black, green. And Pristine Chapel makes white, black, green. Your sideboard has Waltz Upon a Nimbus, because you don't run any removal in the main deck, because why would you do that? Legend Weaving as another tutor. Labor Ambitions for discard. Bind the Mind for combos and just naming removal. And Conspiracy of Raisins for more discard. Probably some of these should be in the main deck, but I'd rather keep my combos. And this is another really fun deck, and I promise you this deck is not red. There's a reason there is no red sources in the mana base. And let me explain this deck. I'm going to leave a link to the gameplay video of me playing this deck in the description, but let me explain the deck. You might recognize Myoga Firebird from last time, but you probably don't recognize Illuminated Firebird, or Denithra Champion, or Ceaseless Stalker. But you might be seeing a pattern. These are all creatures that come back from the graveyard. Hence the name Dredgeless Dredge. It's like Dredge, but you don't have Dredge. So you just kind of turbo mill yourself with cards like Thought Paradigm, which is probably the best card in the deck. Against the Waves, one of my favorite cards again, really good in the deck. Unquenched Greed, Glimpse Beyond, Wheat from Chaff, Faithless Lootings. Our Faithless Lootings, Oracle's Vision is a self-mill cantrip, and Nightmares Unseen. Oh my god, this card is 1 mana to make sometimes 15/15s, 20/20s, almost always lethal. So your opponent's either going to have to leap back chump blockers, make death touchers, do that kind of thing. So fun. Next up, the sideboard, we just have Beneath the Zedinas to protect Graveyard, Twilight Ambush against aggro, Spell Pierce, pretty self-explanatory. Seal the Tomb for combos, and Duress for some more non-creature decks. And finally, we reached the last deck, another brew by me. This deck is really interesting, and you might notice, why are you running 12 lands? I promise, I can explain. I'm running more than 12 lands. And this deck, you can easily keep 1 land hands, because you're not actually only running 12 lands. You're running 1, 2, 3, 20, 23 lands. Because all your other lands, your other 11 lands are rail lines, and rail lines are effectively artifact lands, kind of. You're reading them right now. And how this card works, how this deck works, is it's obviously built around Taste Brilliance, the namesake of the deck. Discard your hand, draw a card for each artifact you control, then add blue for each artifact you control. And you exile it, and your goal is to kind of just storm off, either use Core Charge to win, use Call of the Clock Tower to win, Phyrexian Arc Forger plus Volcanic Pounce to win. Relive Reality is in the deck, so that you can get back your Volcanic Pounce or Call of the Clock Towers or Core Charges if you really need to. Mental Breakthrough untaps pretty much all your lands because they're actually non-lands because they're rail lines. Ride the Storm is insane card draw, and then the rest is just stuff that's more than 1 permanent or 0 cost. And in the sideboard, we have the backup plan, Wonderkind Devising, which is just another super fun card I also built a combo deck around. Mysterious Coffer to return stuff. Ornate Incense, more 0 costs for Wonderkind combo. And this deck can do pretty consistently turn 4s, because rail lines can be played as mana rocks, because why not? And that's it for a guide to every deck in MSEM. I hope you enjoyed it, and if anyone wants me to cover any other decks, I'd be super happy to do a part 2. Just drop a comment in, and I'll try and cover your deck. Bye!